Hey everyone, it is Lotta. Welcome today on the YouTube channel as well as in our My Own Lane network on Facebook. If you're catching us live, feel free to be able to interact with this presentation. But just wanted to introduce our guest here, Attorney Ashley Baker, who of the Truckers Law Firm, and she's going to tell us about the differences between dispatchers as well as freight brokers and answer some of those pending legal questions that I'm sure many of you have, because there's a lot that's out there on the internet that many times is contradicting what you're actually reading and finding. So let us welcome our guest here, Miss Ashley. How are you today?
Hi, I'm doing good.
Good. Thanks for joining us. So I'm going to go ahead, in essence of time, let you jump in, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then the presentation we're about to view.
Okay. So like she said, my name is Ashley Baker. I am an attorney. I'm licensed in Pennsylvania. I handle mostly trucking cases, so anything involving trucking, as far as contracts, or we're open to personal injury cases and things of that nature. And we're just here to help partners in the industry, dispatchers, truckers, motor carriers, with their legal issues. So that is pretty much what we do. And for this presentation, I'm going to be talking about legal issues surrounding truck dispatching. These are things that you may not hear anywhere else. Um, so I do have to start off by saying that this presentation does not constitute legal advice, and it does not create an attorney-client relationship with me and anyone who watches this presentation. And it's also only a representation of my views and not that of any organization that I may be affiliated with. So is it all right for me to jump in?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So as you may know, FMCSA has been mandated to address dispatching and the difference between dispatching and freight brokering. Um, Last year, the infrastructure bill was passed, and that is where that mandate came in. So there are three things at a minimum that FMCSA has to do. So they have to examine the role of a dispatch service. They have to examine the extent to which dispatch services could be considered brokers or bona fide agents. And they have to clarify the level of financial penalties for unauthorized brokerage activity. And so, what FMCSA is doing, and I'm not going to read all of these questions, but what FMCSA is doing is that they are taking public comment. So, usually, when a new regulation is put into place, they ask for the public to comment. They usually give at least a 30-day period. So, I believe the 30-day period for comment is up either July 10th or 11th. I'm not sure which date, but it's the July 10th or 11th. And so it's open for anyone to comment about what they think a dispatch service is, what constitutes illegal freight brokering, and things of that nature. So there are a few of the questions here, and there's another slide with more questions. So there's a total of 13 questions that they want people to address. Primarily, they're trying to figure out what a dispatcher's role is.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I didn't know if you are sharing your screen at this moment and going
Yes,
over your slides.
I am. Can you
Okay,
see
it's
it?
not showing up. So
No.
um, on there, are you able to do presentation mode so we could be on the slide you're talking through?
Okay.
Oh, okay, you unshared.
Okay. Let's go back. Okay, can
All
you
right.
see it now?
Hmm. Okay. And so thank you very much. Here, let me make it larger.
How's that? Did that work?
Okay. Let me come on. Are you able to go into presentation mode so it's much larger?
Yeah, I was in presentation mode. Did that not come
Because
through?
I still see your slides on the left.
How about now?
It's still just showing your slides.
Hmm.
But at least we could see your information now, so that should be fine.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So these are the questions, um, some of the questions that FMCSA is asking. They want to know what the role of a bona fide agent is, what the role of a dispatcher is, and are those the same thing? They want to know, what is the difference between dispatching and freight brokering as people in the industry see it. So they're asking for public comment on that. Um, this is another slide with more questions. Like I said, there are 13 questions in total. One thing that really struck me is that they are also questioning whether load boards are also borderline freight brokerage activity because they are connecting shippers and carriers and they charge a fee for that. And so they are in a way facilitating the movement of freight. And so they want to know from people in the industry, you and me, whether they should be also registered brokers as well. So public comment is open until I think the 10th or 11th of July. And so you want to make sure that you post a comment or, speak out on something if it affects you and if, you so feel inclined. You can also do an anonymous comment so you don't have to post, who you are. And so that's that. So now I want to talk a bit just about the legal definitions of freight brokering and a bona fide agent. So most dispatchers operate under the terminology bona fide agent because that is the language that's in the law. And so a broker is a person other than a motor carrier or an employee or agent of that motor carrier that as a principal or agent sells, offers for sale, negotiates for, or holds itself out by solicitation, advertisement, or otherwise as selling, providing, or arranging for transportation by a motor carrier for compensation. There's two definitions of freight brokering in federal law. So the second one is a broker is a person who, for compensation, arranges or offers to arrange the transportation of property by an authorized motor carrier. So simply put, a broker is a independent party that arranges the movement of freight and makes money doing it, which sounds the same as dispatching, um, but it's different. So, like I said, most dispatchers operate under the bona fide agent language. And a bona fide agent is a person who is part of the normal organization of a motor carrier and performs duties under the carrier's directions, pursuant to a pre existing agreement that provides for a continuing relationship, precluding the exercise of discretion on the part of the agent in allocating traffic between the carrier and others. And in the next slide, I'll kind of explain a little bit of what that means. But I also wanted to say that a person, because it does say a person, does not have to mean a natural person or a person like you and me, but it could mean your business because your business under the law has what's called a personality. So there's a such thing as a person being a business, if that makes sense to you. Um, so a bona fide agent, you need four things. You must perform your duties at the direction of the carrier. The carrier is in charge. You must have a pre-existing agreement. That means that you are not just getting them one load. They're not just trying you out. You have a contract. That contract demonstrates an ongoing relationship, meaning in my view, I would say at least a year. There is no set deadline, but in the transportation industry, relationships last as a standard at least a year. So you want to make sure that you have an agreement in place before you do any dispatching activities for that carrier. The carrier must have access to the broker and shipper to which the load is associated without limitation by the agent. Like I said, the carrier is in charge. You're their agent. They are the principal. You have to do, what they say. If they don't want to take this load, then, you can't force them. You can't filter information. You can't abridge their access to the shipper or broker. If they want full access and not have you be their middleman, then they're entitled to that. Um, and you must perform your duties under the motor carrier's operating authority. So, like I said, you're their agent, they're in charge. Um, okay, so this is just like a broad overview of the different types of law that affect dispatching. So, number one, you have DOT regulations, and they define who can arrange the movement of freight. Um, and that is why we have this time that we're in where they're trying to figure out the role of dispatching and whether any regulations need to be put in place for that. You also have the law of agency, because as you're operating um, as someone's agent, and as you're operating in a capacity where you're taking on a duty or a responsibility that they would do themselves, then there's a body of law that governs that. And it just defines what rights and duties an agent and a motor carrier has according to their relationship. Contract law obviously applies because you have to have a contract. Um, you have to have a contract between you and the carrier. You have to have that pre-existing agreement that demonstrates a long-term relationship. So contract law provisions will apply. Tort law will also apply if that driver has an accident. Dispatchers can be held liable for the driver's accidents depending on their role and how they dispatch the load and things like that. Business law, it defines how a transportation business should be structured and what protections that are afforded to the business based on the type of structure that they choose. And so I'll touch on that briefly. So there's two things that I want to touch on. One is the fact that dispatching agents need to form business entities. Um, Transportation is high liability, so you need to make sure that you have a structure for your business. Um, my view is that in transportation, you need no less than an LLC, but you could also form a corporation. Corporation requires more work. It's usually for a larger company with more executives, more people involved, more owners. Then you might consider a corporation. Obviously, you can have an LLC with multiple owners, um, but you at least want to have an LLC. Partnerships and sole proprietorships are not really conducive to transportation companies because they don't provide you with the same level of protection. And when I say protection, I mean protection from um, taking your assets like your bank account and your house and your personal vehicle and things like that. So if your company becomes liable, you have that LLC and that corporation to protect you as long as you're operating correctly. Um, but when you're sole proprietorship, it's just your personal name. And when it's a partnership, you may have If you owe someone, it may be divided between the partners, but ultimately you will be personally liable. Um, a DBA, which is doing business as, does not provide you protection unless you have an underlying LLC or corporation. So you can have, A and B LLC and then be doing business as another name. As long as that DBA is registered with your state, you should be afforded the same protections as if you were operating as the name of the LLC. Um, your business cannot engage in illegal activity and must operate their business as a business in order to be afforded the protections under the law for that business entity. All right. Another important thing I wanted to talk about was doing your research, do your due diligence. Make sure you know who you are dispatching for, who is the carrier that you're working with. Is the carrier reliable? Do they have a good reputation in the industry? What's their safety rating? What's the likelihood that their drivers are going to get into an accident? How long have they been doing this? Um, those are things that you want to look at and that you want to examine before you enter into a contract. Um, so that's what I want to touch on with that. So I think we're gonna open it up for questions, but this is my contact information. I do have some dispatching books available that talk more in depth about the things that I spoke about today, about your legal structure, being a bona fide agent versus a freight broker, and a lot dealing with your contracts and what should be in them and what can protect you and things like that. Also, if you want to contact me personally, you can call me at that number that's on the screen, 267-251-0740. The books are at theartoftrucking.com. And we can open it up to questions if there are any.
All right, excellent. So I have the number here. I'm going to take off the presentation and share us. Oops, wrong screen. Okay, here is your direct number, and thank you for sharing that information. I know it's a lot of information in a short amount of time, so I want to encourage everyone to either go directly to the website or set up a one on one time with Ashley. Again, her direct number is listed here on the screen. All right, we had a couple of quick questions. Um, One is coming up right here. So, speak a little bit about, and I know this can get a little touchy because it's like a short question and a large question built into one. But can you have multiple businesses under one LLC as a dispatcher? What is your professional advice on that in general?
Um, well, you can, technically, you can have multiple businesses under one LLC. Now, I don't know if you mean several DBAs under the LLC or several LLCs under the LLC. You can do that. A business can own another business. Do I think that you should do that? Probably not. Um, it's a lot of scenarios that could happen with that, right? So if you think of it like this. So if you put everything under one umbrella, if something happens to the big umbrella, everything is at risk, right? So just be cautious with that. But technically, yes, you can have multiple businesses under one.
I know there was a question, and I was trying to pull it back up about when you mentioned dispatcher liabilities, and I'll type the question again to my understanding. Can you go over that one more time in regards to dispatcher liabilities that they should be aware of? And oops, I spelled that
Um,
wrong.
there are a number of ways that dispatchers could be liable. Um, One in particular, as far as when a driver has an accident, is when, um, let's say, drivers have hours of service. We know that, right? But it's not just the responsibility of the driver to know what those are and to operate within those, right? So if you have a driver and that driver doesn't have any hours left to drive, but you dispatch them on a load that needs to be picked up before they have any hours, and they choose to do that, then you could also be liable. There is a case, a federal case, where a dispatcher was liable. Um, so you just want to be mindful of what you're doing and how you're doing it. Also, if you are involved in that carrier's hiring process, because a lot of dispatchers take on more of a back office role and they take on more responsibilities. So, in general, the more responsibilities you take on, the more ways you can be liable. So, if you are taking on the role of hiring for that carrier, then you want to be mindful of whether you've properly vetted this driver, whether he has a prior record of having accidents, or um, whether he has other infractions that would show that, hey, maybe this isn't the best person that you should be hiring for this company. Because if he does have an accident, um, the plaintiff's lawyers are going to look at, they're going to look at, your hiring, his prior record, and they could say maybe you negligently hired this driver. Maybe you didn't properly vet him. Um, so there are a number of ways that dispatchers can be liable. It just, depends on the role that you take on and how you operate in that role.
I love that answer because that leads right into that insurance part. You can adopt a lot of responsibilities, aka liabilities, that you really don't want, and you can even have adopted them just because you placed yourself in the middle of that. And so, having a scope, if you're kind of wondering of how to even that out, or just be very explicit and clear in what it is you do, what it is you don't do, look up the words scope of work, and I'll put that in here too. Scope of work is a common terminology for anybody who does freelance stuff, of exactly what it is they do, what they don't do, because who you are not is the owner of that business. As the motor carrier business, you own your business, and you have to really explicitly, in writing is best, of course, say what it is you do and what you don't do. So thank you again, Ashley, for that. So we have some comments here, very informative, and I think yeah, scope of work at SOW. So yes, processes really make your life easy. It makes it easy for others to understand if they ever had to look at something without your explanation of what's going on. So thank you for those comments here. In closing here, Ashley, what are some takeaways you really, I mean, if someone's just joining us, or again can only catch this last portion, and I'm putting her direct information back on the screen. You guys make sure you're connecting directly with Ashley, because this is just, you're watching a video, you're not having that opportunity to ask a question that's immediately pertinent to you. And instead of searching Google for those answers, here's a resource. Here's a resource that's willing, capable, and ready to answer those questions and consult with you. But Ashley, can you give us some takeaways as to your presentation, so that we can leave with those things in mind?
Okay. So the first thing I would say, and this is, definitely geared toward dispatching. Number one, make sure you are aware of what's going on in the industry. We spoke about FMCSA trying to determine the role of dispatchers and dispatching services, even load boards. Make sure that you stay informed. Connect with different media outlets that focus in transportation, and make sure you get, all the information that you can. Make a public comment. You can make an anonymous comment in the Federal Register. Um, Comment period, again, I think is open between until July 10th and 11th, or 11th, one of the two. Um, Make a public comment. Let people know what dispatchers do, what they are, what they provide to the industry, and their importance. Um, I would also say to make sure that you properly structure your company. Make sure that you have an LLC at least. Um, And make sure that you have a good contract in place. If you read your contract with your carrier and you don't understand what's in it, that's a red flag. You need to understand what's in your contract so you know that you're protected. But that's kind of it. That's what I would say. I can't hear
Great advice. I just saw the screen and I was like, you're muted.
you.
So, great advice. You got to stay relevant. There's so many changes that are taking place. Like I said, there's windows that you need to be aware of in order to just really stay abreast and current of your business operations. You can't go by stuff from 3 years ago because trucking and business, this world isn't even the same as it was just 3 years ago. So please make sure you're reaching out. I have one more comment that popped up. And yes, so thank you. So this is on replay. You'll catch it on our YouTube. It's again for distribution. So please share this information with others that can benefit. Make sure that you're connecting directly with Ashley to get your questions answered. Don't make up the assumptions, and that's how people kind of get lost in the weeds. Get professional help. Literally get professional help. Make sure that you're understanding the exact verbiage that's being used, because in business, you're going to find, as Ashley already said, with contract law, it's about how it's interpreted and how it's implemented. If you miss those things and you say, well, I thought, they're going to go back and point at this piece of paper and ask why you didn't seek more explanation, as she said earlier. So thank you so much for your time, your expertise. You guys, make sure you're sharing this content. If you would like to come and join us and share your value to the trucking industry, just reach out to me on Facebook Messenger. This is a free service. We really just want to make sure people are hearing the things they need, and not just hearing it because they paid for it, as far as like are part of these programs. This is really the basic information we need. It's just not, it's kind of running across some bottlenecks, in my opinion, of who gets it and when they get it, because as we said, time and relevancy is an important factor. So thank you again, Ashley, for your time. And we are going to go ahead and close out. Stay tuned. Make sure you're subscribing to the channel for more content like this. Thank you, Ashley. Appreciate your
Thank
time.
you.
Have a
Thank you.
good one.